Come on, Mason, we're gonna miss the lions. Yaren Bishop called out, jogging after his 6-year-old son who was darting ahead with a crumpled zoo map in his tiny hands. Mason's backpack bounced wildly as he ran toward the African savanna section of the zoo, his wide eyes sparkling with excitement. Dad, they have giraffes too. Real giraffes. Yaren grinned, breathless but smiling. We're not leaving until you've seen every single animal. Truthfully, this zoo trip was a splurge. The tickets had been gifted by a neighbor who couldn't go, and Yaren had packed sandwiches instead of buying lunch to save money. Every part of his life lately was a calculated decision: what bill could wait, what job to chase next, what Mason needed most. Being a single dad wasn't the hard part. Watching his son grow up without the things he deserved, that was the part that gutted him. They made it to the lion enclosure just as a crowd started forming for the midday feeding. Mason pressed his face to the glass while Yaren stood behind him, arms crossed, heart full from the joy on his son's face. Then he noticed her. A woman with long auburn hair stood a few feet away, near the railing. She wore jeans and a white top, nothing flashy, but something about her posture said she wasn't used to being ignored. She leaned over slightly, clearly trying to take a photo of the lions with her phone, but her bag slipped from her shoulder and fell between the bars of the railing and the safety fence. "Shoot," she muttered, crouching down to try to reach it, but it was too far. Yaren glanced around. No zoo staff in sight. Without thinking, he jogged over. "Need help?" he asked. She looked up, startled. Her eyes were a sharp gray, caught somewhere between panic and frustration. I dropped my bag, my wallet, my phone, everything's in there," he nodded, already climbing halfway over the fence. "Don't worry, I got it," she gasped. "You'll get in trouble. Then let's make it quick." He reached down, careful not to lean too far, and managed to snag the strap with just his fingertips. He pulled it up and handed it to her. She clutched it to her chest, wide-eyed. "You didn't have to do that. Wasn't gonna let your day get ruined over a purse," he said with a chuckle. She blinked, then smiled. "Thank you, I'm Ava Monroe." He shook her hand. "Yaren. That's my son Mason over there." Mason had turned around to watch the whole thing and now came running over. "Dad, did you save her purse?" Yaren ruffled his son's hair. "Something like that." Ava crouched down to Mason's level. "You have a pretty cool dad. He's the best," Mason said proudly, then turned to Yaren. "Can we go see the monkeys now?" "Go ahead, I'll catch up in a sec." As Mason ran off toward the primate exhibit, Ava stood beside Yaren. "Thank you again. I would have been stuck without my phone." "No problem, just glad I didn't drop myself in there." She laughed, and it was easy, not forced. "Are you here alone with your son?" "Yeah, just a little zoo adventure," he said, not adding that it was the first fun day they'd had in weeks. Ava glanced toward Mason. "He looks happy." Yaren nodded. "It's all that matters." She hesitated, then said, "Well, I was about to grab lunch at the cafe. Would you and Mason want to join me? My treat." Yaren's instinct was to say no. He didn't like charity or pity. But something about the way she asked it wasn't pity. It was kindness, and Mason would love it, he exhaled. Sure, that'd be nice. The zoo cafe was surprisingly charming, outdoor tables with umbrellas and a view of the flamingo pond. Ava ordered lunch for all three of them and didn't blink when Mason picked the most expensive item on the kids' menu. She even asked if he wanted dessert. Yaren watched her as they ate. She listened when Mason talked, asked questions, and laughed at his stories. She was warm, attentive, and had a presence that made the world feel slower in the best kind of way. "So what do you do?" Yaren asked, sipping his water. Ava tilted her head. "I'm in business, mostly management." He raised an eyebrow. "That vague hush," he grinned. "I run a few companies." "Keep things moving. It's not very interesting," he laughed. "I doubt that." "What about you?" "Construction, mostly. Whatever pays. Lately, it's been harder to land steady gigs." She looked at him, and for a moment, her expression softened in a way that didn't feel like pity, but understanding. "That's rough," he shrugged. "We manage." Mason, halfway through a chocolate ice cream, pointed at Ava. "You're really nice. Are you rich?" Yaren nearly choked on his sandwich. "Mason," Ava burst out laughing. "It's okay." She leaned toward Mason. "Let's just say I do all right." By the time they finished lunch, the afternoon sun had begun to dip. Ava walked with them through the rest of the zoo, taking photos of Mason feeding the goats and laughing when Yaren pretended to be scared of the snakes. When they reached the exit, Yaren turned to her. "Thanks for lunch and the company, you didn't have to do all that." "I wanted to," she said, her gaze lingering on him. "Can I see you again?" He blinked. "You mean like a date," she said, not flinching. Yaren looked at Mason, who was now busy climbing a statue of a rhinoceros, then back at Ava. "I don't know, my life's a little messy," she smiled. "I don't mind messy." He studied her. Most women didn't stick around when they saw the reality of his life: late rent, odd jobs, a kid he lived for. But Ava didn't look like she was pretending. She looked like she meant it. He nodded slowly. "Okay, yeah, I'd like that." She pulled a small card from her bag and handed it to him. "Call me, no pressure." Yaren took it, pocketed it, and smiled. "You're full of surprises." Ava tilted her head. "You have no idea." As she walked away, Mason ran up beside him. "Dad, I like her." Yaren looked down at his son, then back at Ava, disappearing into the crowd. "Yeah, kid." "Me too." Yaren stood in the cramped kitchen of their small apartment, elbow deep in a sink full of dishes, while Mason sat at the table behind him, drawing on the back of an old water bill. The apartment was quiet except for the clinking of plates and the faint hum of the refrigerator that had been threatening to give out all week. "Dad, do you think Ava likes dinosaurs?" Mason asked without looking up from his drawing. Yaren paused, rinsing a plate. "Why?" "I want to draw her one. But I don't know if she likes the spiky kind or the big ones with the long necks." Yaren turned, drying his hands on a threadbare towel. "I think she'd like whatever you draw. She seems like someone who appreciates creativity." Mason nodded solemnly and got back to his work, tongue sticking out slightly in concentration. The card Ava had given Yaren sat on the counter, untouched since he'd slipped it from his pocket after they got home. It was simple, just her name and a number, but it carried a weight that made him hesitate. He wasn't used to someone like her, not just kind, but confident in a way that didn't feel like performance. She didn't glance at her phone every 2 seconds. She hadn't acted like being around his kid was some kind of chore, but people could be hard to read, and he had Mason to think about. The next afternoon, while Mason was at school, Yaren finally picked up the card and dialed the number. It rang twice before a low, rich voice answered. "You actually called," Ava said, sounding more amused than surprised. "I wasn't sure if I should," Yaren admitted, leaning against the kitchen counter. "But I figured if I didn't, I might regret it." "I'm glad you did," she said. "Are you free tonight?" He blinked. "Tonight? I'm not asking for anything fancy. I know a place. I'll drive." Yaren hesitated. "I can't leave Mason alone. Bring him. It's not a date unless you call it one." He chuckled. "You're something else." "I'll take that as a yes." That evening, a sleek black SUV pulled up in front of their apartment at exactly 6. Yaren had never seen a car that clean in their neighborhood before. He opened the back door for Mason, who climbed in with his dinosaur drawing clutched tightly in both hands. Ava sat behind the wheel, wearing a navy blouse and her hair pulled into a low twist. She turned, smiling. "Hey, Mason. I hope you're hungry." "I made you this," Mason said, holding out the paper. She took it gently, unfolding it with care. "Is this a stegosaurus?" He beamed. "It's got spikes. I thought you might like it." "I love it," she said, tucking it carefully into her bag. "I'm going to hang it in my office." Yaren buckled his seatbelt, watching her hands on the wheel as she pulled into traffic. Her nails were painted a pale neutral, neat and precise. He caught the faint scent of something expensive that wasn't perfume but still lingered. They drove through the city, past neighborhoods he rarely visited, until they reached a waterfront restaurant with a covered patio strung with warm lights. The hostess greeted Ava by name and led them to a private table near the edge of the deck. Mason gasped when he spotted the boats in the marina. "Can we go on one of those? Maybe someday," Yaren said, then looked at Ava. "This place is something." "The chef owes me a favor," she said lightly, unfolding her napkin. "I helped him secure funding for his second location." Yaren raised an eyebrow. "You're full of surprises." "I told you that already," she said with a grin. Dinner was nothing like Yaren expected. There were no white tablecloths or stuffy silence. The staff treated Ava like she belonged there, which clearly she did, but she never acted like it made her better than anyone else. She ordered Mason a custom mocktail after he shyly asked about the drink with the umbrella on the next table, and when Yaren tried to pay for dessert, she waved him off. "You helped me at the zoo," she said. "Let me help you enjoy a night out." After they finished, they walked along the dock. Mason skipped ahead, staring at the reflections on the water. "So," Ava said, her voice quieter now, "are you always this cautious?" Yaren glanced at her. "Is that your way of saying I'm hard to read?" "It's my way of saying I don't mind if you're protective," she said. "But I'm not here to play games." He slid his hands into his pockets. "It's not you. I just don't bring people into Mason's life unless I know they're gonna stick." "That's fair," she said, "but I wouldn't invite you into mine if I didn't want you there." He stopped walking, and she turned to face him. "I still don't know much about you," he said. "You're clearly not just someone who runs businesses. You knew the chef, the hostess, that car." She met his gaze steadily. "I own several companies. I'm on the board of 3 private equity firms. I've built everything I have from the ground up with a lot of mistakes and a few smart risks." Yaren exhaled slowly. "So you're a millionaire?" "I am," she said without flinching. "And I didn't tell you that at the zoo because that's not what matters. I'm not trying to impress you, Yaren. I'm trying to know you." "I don't have a retirement plan," he said bluntly. "Or a savings account. I'm behind on rent. I fix things for people who pay late, and I balance it all so Mason doesn't notice how close we are to the edge." Her expression didn't change. "Then you're the strongest person I've met." "That's not strength, that's survival. Sometimes they're the same thing." He looked away toward his son. "I don't want your money. I never offered it." Their eyes met again, and something unspoken passed between them, not pity, not charity, but recognition. Mason came rushing back. "Can we come here again?" Ava looked at Yaren. "That's up to your dad." Yaren nodded slowly. "Yeah, maybe next time." "I'll bring the dessert," Ava smiled. "It's a deal." Yaren stood frozen in the middle of Ava's penthouse, trying to make sense of the world he'd just stepped into. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline, its glittering lights stretching far beyond anything he'd ever seen from his side of town. The hardwood floors gleamed beneath his worn boots, and the scent of something subtle, clean linen and soft citrus hung in the air like it belonged to another universe entirely. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected any of it. "Make yourself comfortable," Ava said, slipping off her heels near the entrance. "I'll grab Mason some juice." Mason had already wandered over to the massive glass wall, pressing his palms to the window with a hushed woe. He didn't ask questions. He didn't seem surprised. To him, Ava's world was just as magical as the zoo, as boats on the water, as anything else he didn't yet know he couldn't have. Yaren, however, felt like every inch of his skin didn't belong here. He crossed the room slowly, stopping near a leather armchair that probably cost more than his car. He didn't sit. Ava returned with a small glass of apple juice and handed it to Mason, who took it with a bright thank you before settling on the plush rug, completely entranced by the view. "You okay?" Ava asked, her voice quieter now. He nodded once. "I didn't expect this. You didn't ask." "I didn't think I needed to." Ava stepped closer, but not too close. "I wasn't trying to hide it. I just didn't want to lead with it." "What is this place?" he asked, still not sitting. "My home." He let out a low breath. "You live here alone. For now." He looked at her, then really looked, and for the first time, she didn't seem like a mystery. She seemed like someone who'd spent a long time building walls made of glass, polished so clean they looked invisible until you ran straight into them. "I don't know what you want from me." She didn't hesitate. "I want to keep seeing you. You could be with anyone, people who wear tailored suits and pronounce wine names correctly." "I don't care about that." "Maybe you should." Ava stepped past him and sat gently on the edge of the couch. "You think I haven't done the suit and boardroom thing? I've been on dates where men talked at me for an hour without asking a single question. I've been proposed to by someone who saw my bank account before he saw my face." Yaren didn't speak. He didn't know how to respond to that. She tilted her head. "You looked me in the eye and climbed over a fence to help me without flinching. You didn't ask what I did for a living, you didn't try to impress me, and you didn't treat Mason like a burden." Yaren looked down at his son, who was now sprawled on his stomach, drawing something in the condensation on the window. "I don't know how to do this," he said finally. I'm not asking you to, she said. There isn't a script, there's just showing up. He lowered himself into the armchair, the leather groaning softly. What happens when our lives don't fit? Then we make room, he shook his head. It's not just about us, it's him too, his whole world is me. I can't afford to bring someone in and then have them disappear. I'm not going anywhere, you can't promise that. No, she said, but I can show you. Silence stretched between them, but it wasn't hostile. It was thick with questions neither of them knew how to ask yet. Finally, Yaren leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Why me? Ava didn't blink. Because you listen, because you care, because when you look at me, you don't see a number, you see a person. He looked away. I'm just trying to make rent next week, she nodded. And I'm just trying to make sense of a life that moves too fast to feel real. Maybe we balance each other. I don't want your money. I know. They sat that way for a while, Yaren watching the city lights, Ava watching him. Mason eventually fell asleep, curled up with a throw blanket Ava had draped over him. The room dimmed as the night grew darker, but neither of them moved to turn on a light. When was the last time you did something just for you? Ava asked softly. He let out a short laugh. I don't remember. I want to take you somewhere, he looked at her. Where? It's a surprise. Just a day, you can bring Mason. There's a spare room here, you wouldn't even have to pack. He hesitated, but Ava didn't push. After a long pause, he said, I'll think about it. She reached over just once and touched his hand. That's all I ask. He didn't pull away, but he didn't grip back either. That night, after she helped him carry Mason to the guest room and gently set him on the bed, Yaren stood in the doorway watching her tuck the blanket around his son like she'd done it 100 times before. She turned to him. You can sleep here too if you want, just the couch. No expectations. He looked at her for a long moment. I should go? Ava nodded. Okay. He turned to leave but paused before opening the front door. I don't know what this is, he said. Neither do I. He opened the door then stopped again. But I want to. She smiled, not with her mouth, but with something softer in her eyes. Then we'll figure it out. Yaren stepped into the hallway and pulled the door shut behind him, heart thudding with something that wasn't fear but wasn't quite safety either. It was something new. The private plane touched down on a windswept island just past noon, its sleek silver body glinting beneath the unforgiving sun. The moment the cabin door opened, the scent of salt and hibiscus swept through the air, rich and heady, carried on the breeze from the turquoise sea. Ava stepped out first and turned, offering her hand to Mason as he bounced down the steps, eyes wide with wonder. It's real, he gasped, breaking into a sprint toward the edge of the sand as Yaren followed behind, stunned into silence. A man in a white button-down and sunglasses greeted them at the end of the runway. Ava nodded once, and within seconds, their luggage was transferred into an open-air jeep waiting nearby. Yaren took it all in the private runway, the glistening shore, the villa perched on a slope of white stone ahead, each detail a reminder that this wasn't just a vacation. This was her world, and she'd brought him into it, not as a curiosity, but as a piece she wanted to keep. He slid into the jeep beside her. You didn't tell me we were leaving the country. I said it was a surprise, she replied, brushing her hair away from her face. And technically, it's still domestic, just barely. What is this place? She looked over at him. Somewhere I come when I need to remember what it feels like to breathe. The drive to the villa was short, winding through palm-lined paths and low stone walls until they reached a gate that opened on approach. The villa itself was a Marvel open concept, designed to blur the line between inside and outside, with views that stretched endlessly in every direction. Ava led Mason toward a shaded patio with a shallow pool while a housekeeper appeared discreetly, offering cool towels and a tray of drinks. Yaren stood back, watching his son dip his feet into the water like he'd been born for this life. This isn't just a vacation, is it? He asked quietly. Ava turned to him, the sunlight catching the delicate chain at her throat. No. It's more than that. Why now? She studied him for a moment before answering. Because I've spent too many years building things that impress strangers and too few building a life that matters to me. I don't want to keep doing that. Yaren folded his arms. And you think I'm part of that life? I don't think, she said. I know, he glanced toward Mason. He's never seen anything like this. He deserves to. Yaren exhaled, then sat on the edge of a chaise lounge. I'm not used to being taken care of. I fix things. I carry the weight. That's all I've ever done. Ava moved closer. What if someone actually wanted to carry some of it with you? I wouldn't know how to let them. Then start small, she said. Start with a weekend. The next 2 days unfolded like something out of someone else's life. Mornings began with breakfast on the terrace, Mason's laughter echoing through the open kitchen as he discovered a new tropical juice each day. Ava showed them hidden coves, took them on a glass-bottom boat, and let Mason steer under supervision, his face lit in awe as fish swam beneath them. But it wasn't the luxury that shook Yaren, it was the ease. The way Ava folded herself into their rhythms without disrupting them. The way she asked Mason what he wanted to eat before suggesting anything herself. The way she touched Yaren's arm when she passed him, like he was already hers and always had been. On the final night, a dinner had been set up on a raised platform near the edge of the property, candles flickering in the warm dusk breeze. Mason had fallen asleep early, curled up on a dabe with a book, and the housekeeper had gently carried him to bed. Yaren stood barefoot on the edge of the outdoor dining space, the sea stretching in front of him like a promise. Ava joined him, barefoot as well, holding 2 glasses of wine. Everything here feels borrowed, he said. It doesn't have to be. He took the glass but didn't drink. I keep waiting for something to break. She turned to face him fully. Then let's build something that doesn't. He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time since they met, he didn't see the difference in what they had or didn't have. He saw a woman who had every reason to protect her world and yet had opened it to his son, to him with no guarantees. I told myself I'd never let anyone matter like this again, he said. I told myself I'd never fall for someone who didn't fit neatly into my world. He laughed under his breath. We're a mess. We're honest, she said. And that's rarer than anything I've ever owned. A long silence passed between them, broken only by the distant crash of waves. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Yaren blinked. What is that? Something I never thought I'd do. He took a step back. Ava, it's not a proposal, she said, opening it to reveal a simple silver band. It's a promise. I don't want to change your life. I want to build something new from both of ours. He stared at the ring, heart thudding. I don't need an answer tonight, she said. But I needed you to know. He didn't speak. Instead, he took the ring from the box, turned it between his fingers, and then slid it gently back into her palm. Then he stepped forward, closed the distance between them, and kissed her. It wasn't careful or hesitant, it was full, raw, certain. When he pulled back, he rested his forehead against hers. You didn't just change my life, he said, voice low. You gave it a future. 3 months later, Yaren stood at the edge of a small garden in the same villa, dressed in a tailored navy suit that Ava had insisted on, though he'd drawn the line at cufflinks. Mason tugged at his tie beside him, already beaming in a matching vest. The guests were few, just the people who mattered, the ceremony simple. But the moment Ava walked down the stone path barefoot, carrying a small bouquet of white orchids, Yaren felt the world fall into place. They met in the center of the garden, hands already joined. I still don't know how you found me, he whispered. I didn't, she said. You showed up, at the exact moment I needed you most, and when she said, I do, it didn't feel like a vow, it felt like a beginning. Rain pattered gently against the windows of their newly bought brownstone in Brooklyn. A quiet, ivy-framed corner property, Ava had fallen in love with the moment they toured it. The kind of home that didn't announce wealth with marble but whispered it with old brick, warmth, and light filtering through bay windows. The kind of place Yaren had never imagined owning, let alone sharing, until Ava made it real. Mason sat cross-legged in the living room, carefully building a city out of blocks, while Ava stood at the stove in an oversized sweatshirt, stirring something fragrant. Yaren watched from the doorway, his shirt sleeves rolled up, a tool belt still slung low on his hips from the latest shelf he'd installed in the study. You're cooking, he asked, eyes narrowing playfully. She glanced over her shoulder. It's soup, not a 5-course tasting menu. Don't get excited. I was about to check the sky for signs of the apocalypse. I'll have you know I made this all the time in college. Really, you went to college, she raised an eyebrow. I have 2 degrees. Well, that explains the soup, she laughed, setting the spoon aside. Come taste it and pretend to be impressed. He moved across the kitchen, dipped the spoon she offered, and tasted it. You know, for someone who owns a vineyard and probably eats at Michelin-starred places on Tuesdays, this is actually decent. I'm putting that on my tombstone. He kissed her temple. You'll have to beat me there. She leaned into him for a moment, her voice softer. Don't joke like that. He didn't respond right away. His hand found hers and laced their fingers together. This is the first time in a long time I've felt, still, he said finally. Like I'm not bracing, she squeezed gently. You don't have to anymore. They stood like that until Mason called out, Dad, can you help me build a bridge from the couch to the bookshelf? Yaren grinned. On it, bud. He kissed her once quick and certain before heading into the living room, where Mason had already laid out a blueprint of mismatched blocks. Ava watched them from the kitchen, the image of the two of them tangled in cushions and laughter so ordinary, so blissfully quiet that her throat tightened. It was later that night, long after Mason had fallen asleep with a book tucked under his arm, that Yaren found her sitting on the bench in their small backyard garden, wrapped in a blanket. He joined her silently, draping his arm around her shoulders. I got a call today, she said after a while. One of the firms I used to sit on the board for, they want to offer me a new position. Bigger, international, he tensed. I told them no, he turned. Why? Because I don't want international, I want this. I want you and Mason and soup on rainy nights and a house that actually echoes when it's quiet, he exhaled. Are you sure? I've never been more. They sat in silence for a long moment, the kind that didn't need filling. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded paper. I've been working on something. She took it gently and unfolded it, eyes scanning the rough sketches of a community center. Playgrounds, classrooms, gardens. The title at the top, Bishop House. I want to build it, he said. A place for kids like Mason, like I was. A place where single parents can bring their kids and not feel like they're falling behind. I've been saving every check from the contractor jobs I've taken since the wedding. I didn't want to say anything until I was sure. She stared at the drawings, then at him. You don't need my money. No. But I want your name on the entrance. She turned her face toward him, her eyes shining. Yaren, that's terrifying. No, that's love. They didn't need more words after that. Months passed. The brownstone transformed, room by room, into a home layered in memories. Photos of the three of them lined the stairwell. Mason on the island boat, Ava and Yaren with flour on their faces in the kitchen. A blurry shot of Mason's first school performance where he'd insisted on singing a solo and forgot every word halfway through. Yaren spent mornings on the Bishop House site, overseeing crews, pouring foundation, and keeping a careful eye on every detail. Ava transitioned away from boardrooms, opting instead to mentor young entrepreneurs, hosting intimate workshops in the brownstone sunlit parlor. Mason started second grade and announced he wanted to be an architect, like his dad, but also rich, like Ava, which prompted a week-long debate about allowances. One Sunday afternoon, they hosted a housewarming, not for themselves, but for the neighbors. The backyard buzzed with laughter, plates of food, and children running barefoot on the grass. As the sun dipped low, Yaren stood on the small makeshift stage he'd built from scrap wood and cleared his throat. Ava stood beside him, one arm around Mason. I just wanted to say thank you, he began. To everyone who came, to everyone who helped us feel like we belonged here. And to Ava for reminding me that love doesn't always come in the form you expect. Sometimes it's a woman with a too expensive car and a heart that makes every place feel like home. Ava laughed softly, blinking back tears. Later that night, after the guests were gone and the string lights twinkled quietly above them, they sat on the back steps, barefoot, their feet touching. I used to think love was something you had to fight for, Yaren said. Wasn't it? No, he said. Not this. This wasn't a fight. This was a gift. She rested her head on his shoulder. We're just getting started. Mason's voice echoed from inside. You're missing the movie. They stood hand in hand, walking back into the house that had once belonged to dreams and now belonged to them. And from that day forward, no one ever had to ask if they were happy. You could see it in the way they looked at each other across a room, in the way they never let go.